Gosh, we've had a lot of fun planning our panel and getting to know each other. The four of us didn't know each other until we met planning this panel, coming up with questions and things like that, so it's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. As we know, clinical trials, it's a lot. It's overwhelming sometimes, very expensive, as we've all talked about, but also very important. So I'm happy to moderate this panel. And I want to introduce you. I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about them and their experience. So, all right, go ahead.
I'll start.
Hollie.
My name is Hollie DeSmet, and I am the owner of HJD Consulting. Something that I recently went into was my own consulting business, but most recently, I was the Senior Director of Regulatory and Quality for Senexcel Clinical Research, which is an 18-site network across the U.S. My first foray into clinical research was from the very bottom in recruiting and then going into study coordinating, working into quality and regulatory, and just really working my way up the ladder. And so I've been in this industry for about 14 years.
Hi, I'm Neeraj Rama. I'm the Chief Investment Officer for CBCC. CBCC was founded by Dr. Ravi Patel, and we have cancer centers all over the country and all over the world. And one of our main lines we got into about 15 years ago is the CRO world. We have a lot of subsidiaries. We have a large ecosystem in healthcare, especially from drug development all the way to delivering care in the healthcare system. And so about 10 years ago, I took an active interest in our subsidiary company. And our team is here, and they always let me kind of come to the office and play around with them and help them out. So I do a lot of the strategy and big picture planning for our CRO division.
Hi, I'm Erika Keith, and I'm based out of San Francisco. I am Director of Business Development for Curabit. We are a DCT, so if you guys don't know that acronym, it's a decentralized clinical trial. So we're a full-service CRO, and we were coined being the first virtual CRO. So we deal a lot with clinical trials where we assess technology and where it can add value before we look at the traditional brick and mortar site-based. Thank you.
Gosh. So real quick, before we get started into our panelists, I'd like to see, it's hard to see with these bright lights, but it would be interesting to see how many of you in the audience are responsible or conduct clinical trials or CRO, sponsor. Can you raise your hands just real quick so we can get kind of an idea of our audience for a second? Great. So a lot. How many of you wish you weren't or want to? Great. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to dive in here a little bit with a history of clinical trials. So Neeraj, if you could dive into what's the history of clinical trials? How has it been, historically? How have sponsors, CROs managed clinical trials?
Yeah, I think, and if you go back in history and look at it, it was, everyone's done the training, right? GCP, good clinical practices, and the Nuremberg trials and the Nuremberg stuff, and you can see that there needed to be an institution or a system created that could, I don't want to use the word streamline because a lot of people have been hurt if you really go back hundreds and hundreds of years. So I think creating a system where society wants to develop drugs, devices, next generation of therapies to help society, but making sure it happens in a way that is beneficial and does the least harm while trying to develop these new technologies. I mean, anyone can tell you when you're trying to develop something new, and especially when it involves the human body, it's going to be dangerous. And I think the CROs have played a big role in that. You have experts who have, over the years, developed regulations, systems in place, and we've come to this point. And by no means have we perfected that system, but it's an ongoing system. It's an ongoing work in progress, and it's exciting to see where we can go with the advent of things like AI, information of things in wearables. So, I think and things like, I don't know if anyone's read the book Philadelphia Chromosome. Maybe we can talk about rational drug development models are very interesting to me as well. But the history of clinical trials, I mean, it really is kind of an ugly history if you go back long enough, and we should always remember that. So.
Yeah, thank you. And something that you said kind of sparked my interest. So you're talking about like new technologies. So before we dive into that, what are some of the challenges that we've seen in clinical trials for the historical approach to clinical trials? I know we've talked about it. Erika, you have some great, we've had some great discussions between the three of us here on that. So what are some of those limitations, and why is the need to kind of progress and go to AI and some of these other avenues?
I absolutely think that the integration of technology is what the driving force of what clinical trials is trying to replicate. Oh, sorry, my apology. I absolutely think that technology is revolutionizing clinical trials. That really is the future of what we are feeling as a CRO, is touching base with all of the technologies the most. Do you want me to continue on that question?
No, I think you're good.
Is that a segue?
Yeah. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think one of the hardest parts of, the biggest failure of clinical trials is site, patient recruitment. And seeing that, and someone correct me if my stats are wrong. I was telling my co-panelists, I got attacked a couple weeks ago on a panel for, even though I was right. But having solutions in place to improve site recruitment, patient recruitment, decentralized clinical trials, as you mentioned, it's an exciting area of seeing innovations in that area.
And that's, if you want me to go ahead and go into the technology, that is what is being used now. So what we are doing is we are using wearables, which is real-time, continuous monitoring, and then the recruitment part is all done on the web. So we are going to support base sites and recruiting patients. We are looking for a more diverse population that does live hundreds of miles away from a site, but they might only have to go into that site once or maybe not at all. And this is all done through technology, through our televisits, through our clinical operations that is using televisit to engage with the patients, to screen them, to recruit them, to really bring them on board and engage them in the trial, and then also take them through the trial as well. So all of our technology is really where a DCT utilizes the technology to communicate and bring the trial to the patient rather than the patient coming to the trial.
Gosh, that's interesting. As a sponsor, I think of a lot of different ways that I could change my current clinical trials, 2 of them that I have ongoing right now, for something that, instead of one site, one specific location, your technology would allow that to expand into and possibly increase our recruitment. It seems like it takes a long time to enroll, to locate qualified subjects, right, meeting the criteria.
So I either don't have the microphone or I'm yelling into the microphone, my apology. We just had a trial that we utilized. It was a fibromyalgia trial, and we were brought in late. So that means you're kind of trying to rescue a trial that you're running parallel against. But it allowed us to really look at the data of a traditional site-based brick-and-mortar CRO versus a DCT, which is what we are, which is more or less in the cloud and virtual. And we're utilizing technology to engage with these patients. Where we saw a huge difference after the trial was finished, when we compared both a traditional study versus a siteless-based study, a DCT, we noticed that I think we had 10 times the amount of participants. And what we didn't really expect is that the participants were of greater quality. Quality meaning that they obtained, they were in the study longer, so we had better retention. Then they also engaged more throughout the study. So we saw that we were able to do it faster. I mean, it wasn't even comparative in the time that it took the sites to recruit the patients versus if we did it digitally, we blew them out of the water. We finished earlier, we started later, we did it cheaper, we finished earlier. But that being said, it's not really all about the cost either. And when you're comparing a DCT versus a site-based, it really is the trial and what fits best with your trial.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Let's dive into, some of the new technologies that we're seeing with clinical trials. Hollie, can you take us down that road a little bit of what are the emerging technologies that yourself or your companies that you're seeing out there with your clients? What are the new technologies that they're implementing?
So of course, currently everything is becoming electronic. We're getting rid of paper, right? So you have electronic investigator site files, you have electronic source, you have e-consent, and all of these things. You have patient portals where they can go in and actually complete their patient-reported outcomes, down to something very specific, like in a movement disorder trial, actually doing the drawings on their tablet for their patient-reported outcome. And so that's happening now very rapidly. But even more so, artificial intelligence is becoming very rapidly growing and very exciting in the potentials that we have in clinical research. Intelligent machines, they can perform tasks that typically would require some human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, and decision making. So the critical component of AI is machine learning by using algorithms and statistical methods, and learn from data and improving their performance over time by learning from the data that they're getting. They can make predictions, and AI can be leveraged to streamline clinical research in the future.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to add? Great. Hollie, let's talk about regulatory and ethical considerations as technology evolves and as regulatory bodies adapt. Yes. What are your thoughts on that?
So I do believe that the FDA is watching closely, the regulatory bodies are watching closely to provide those guidances that they have provided across clinical research tied to artificial intelligence. I know that recently the FDA, they're following an action plan for AI use guidance, predetermined change control plan for AI-enabled devices. So they want to ensure that it's clear what is being changed in the device using artificial intelligence and how these changes will be developed while maintaining the safety and efficacy. What's also important is good machine learning practices. So it is a machine, but you want to ensure that you're removing the bias from the algorithms in artificial intelligence. The FDA recently published 5 guiding principles for the development of predetermined change control plans. So they have focused, I did jot these down here, focused and bounded, describing specific changes a manufacturer intends to implement in their artificial intelligence and their machine learning. Risk-based, the intent, design, and implementation take a risk-based approach. Evidence-based, so in the real world, will the benefits outweigh the risks? That's always the question in clinical research, right? Transparent, these companies that are developing artificial intelligence, they need to provide clear information for how they will be transparent moving forward as well. And total product lifestyle perspective improve quality and integrity of machine learning by considering perspectives of all stakeholders, meaning sponsors, CRO, subject, clinicians. And so they are following this innovation that's rapidly growing. And I expect to see more regulations, more guidance come out by the FDA on this.
Great. Let's circle back a little bit, Erika, on the patient-centric approaches. Do you have examples of patient engagement and strategies that have proven successful?
Right. I guess we could use a case study from a trial that we did for stroke victims. That is, and it also incorporates wearables. So this company has a microchip clip that the patient or participant clips on their shoe, and then an algorithm also plays in their ear. So when they came to us, what we did is we made it a hybrid trial. So it couldn't be all just a decentralized clinical trial. It needed to be also a site-based. So we sent them a QR code. They took the QR code into the labs that we have relationships with Quest Labs, and they did a walking test to gauge their gait and their performance. And then they went home for the trial. So within this trial, there's a wearable clip onto their shoe, and then they're listening to the algorithm while they're walking, and so their gait's already been measured, but this wearable measures their gait and then also trains them to learn to walk again and improve their walking, right? So as there's not something for insurance or after the fact, after someone has stroke, in rehabilitation, this is addressing that, and it's patient-centric because they're bringing the trial to the patient. This is every day that we need to have continuous monitoring of their, I can't figure this out, but we need to have continuous monitoring of the success that they're having or the trouble that they're having, because then we can make changes in the trial.
That makes me think of, so I'm not a part of developing artificial intelligence by any means, but as coming from a regulatory background and a quality background, I see it coming, and so I want to make sure I stay ahead of it. These wearables, they produce that real-time data of the physiological parameters, and artificial intelligence can actually identify patterns for the onset of adverse events. So clinicians can actually get ahead of that and treat a patient sooner because artificial intelligence, just recognizing those patterns, will alert you that this is, could potentially happen. So it's actually very fascinating what's coming down the pipeline with that and what's currently working in clinical research.
And I believe that's where I really think that hybrid trials are the future. That is where I think that we really need to look at the protocol of the trial and see where first the technology can add value and utilize that first, and then look at the partnerships. What sites can add value to the diversity, to a number of things, because usually with most trials you really need both. You need site-based, and I also think that you need a DCT portion. So I think in the future, rather than thinking about it in terms of one or the other, it has to be site-based or it has to be DCT, I think that that is the wrong way to go about it. I really think that you need to look at it and open it up to use all the partnerships, and to kind of look at it being a la carte, like I'm gonna use this from over here, I'm gonna use this from over here, and then have the greatest benefit.
Yeah, so I agree with everything everyone said, and I think AI is powerful for sure. I mean, and maybe AI writes all the protocols from now onwards, but more importantly, I think what AI needs to do is line up the interests of all the parties. So FDA, safe and effective, CMS, fair and equitable, and get industry to point the metaphorical bazooka at the problems that the healthcare system is facing in the United States or globally. So there is so much clinical trials happening, so much science happening, which I'm not trying to demotivate on, but AI can help say, hey, these are the major problems we need to fix to bring down costs in the healthcare system, improve the livelihood of patients, and this is where industry needs to focus. Yeah, so I think that's where I'm really excited about AI. It's like precision and accuracy, right? And we talk about it, oh, it's going to help us do drug development and fix all that stuff and make it more efficient. But also, what are the problems we need to go after? We do know cancer is a big problem. We know neurological diseases are a good problem, but really kind of curating that information. CMS has the data, FDA has the data, and getting everybody to work together better. Last night we were talking, when after September 11th, there was the big 9/11 commissions concluded that it was the lack of agencies, the CIA, the FBI, and et cetera, not working together that caused 9/11 to happen, because the information was already out there that these people are working on. It's like similar problems in the clinical in the healthcare world. I have the zinger I use. It's we have Star Trek medicine being delivered in a Flintstones healthcare system, and I don't know if AI fixes all of that, but it's getting. I'm pro-regulation, but I'm not pro-regulation when it means the benefit for pharma companies only or for sites only. We were talking earlier, I think patients should get more compensation for participating in a trial. PIs hog up a lot of that money. Sites hog up a lot of that money. And if we know one thing, the world is moving, is a consumer-driven world, and we talk about healthcare becoming more consumer-centric, and I'm excited to see how AI can play that. We invested in a company called Mendel.ai, which empowers a patient to go online, search, put in their symptoms or their disease state, and it pretty much gives you a Yelp list around the nation of the trials going on in the world. And so now all of a sudden, a very complicated thing can be ranked automatically for you to say, hey, I want to participate in this trial. How can I, not have to travel to an academic site, to do it in a decentralized model? All of these things happening scream, we need effective CROs that can bridge this stuff quickly so that we don't see this anti-democratization of access, right? It's like, oh, if you're not in Boston, Houston, or San Francisco or LA, you're not getting the best clinical trials. Somebody in the middle of, a small city in Utah, shouldn't have to break the bank to travel to get a trial that can save their life or improve their life. And so I'm very passionate about the democratization of access in healthcare.
Yeah, that might help. Everything that you're saying, one thing that came to mind is expanded access, right? So that might limit the times that, like, a sponsor like myself is having to apply for expanded access, because your patients would have more access if more companies used DCT.
In the areas they need it.
Yes, exactly.
I hate to say, I hate to quote this guy because, he's accomplished, but Steve Jobs said, he was this great interview in the 90s when he came back to Apple, and he said, the big problem is that we keep telling the consumer what we want to give them, and you really have to start with the consumer and then engineer the solution there. I think that problem is really the case in clinical trials. The PI tells you, oh, I've got a trial, you get this trial. And that's not fair. If there's a better trial for that patient should get access to it somehow. And I'm not sitting here saying I have the solution, but I know that as technology, the internet, the breaking down of information asymmetry, which exists terribly in pharma industry and healthcare. We were, again, in a conversation 30, 40 years ago, if you told somebody, oh, you can book your own vacation and you can travel to multiple countries and multiple flights and trains, and you can do it all by yourself without a travel agent, they would have called you crazy. I personally think 50 years from now or 20 years from now or 100 years from now, they'll say, hey, you as a consumer can manage this trial and get access to a drug that, or something that's not on the market yet, as easy as click, 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 and it's done. And I think it's the same way information asymmetry will be broken down, just the same way travels was changed like that.
Our CEO beautifully states that what we're doing in decentralized clinical trials and utilizing the technology so much to bring the trial to where the patients live, work, and play, that what we're doing is new. And he's like, and people are scared of the future. And I kind of backtrack and go back to when I was growing up and we didn't have cell phones and, you know,
Great.
you know, how there's no way that anyone in this room could probably have predicted our technology and the world that we're living in today. And that is, you know, when you get the backlash of, oh no, the DCT won't work for my trial. Well, let's just talk about it. Let's see, let's get a little bit more education, let's discuss it, and maybe it's 100% not the fit for your trial, but if it is in one avenue or another, let's utilize it to add value.
I agree with that. I think that, I mean, obviously, DCTs, I learned of them during the pandemic because they became a necessity. There was a lot of home health visits, and DCTs really helped with that. I think your idea and what your company is doing with partnering with these brick and mortar clinical research sites, and because outpatient studies can be done DCT, right? You don't have any inpatient stays, you're going to their home. But those inpatient studies, they can be a hybrid, and you're right about that. You can have DCT going to their home when you have these simple visits that only take a few minutes and the patient doesn't have to drive so far. And those inpatient visits done with your partner who's a brick and mortar. And I think the great thing about DCTs too is you're taking clinical trials into communities that haven't had the opportunity to be involved with them previously. And so I think that's good.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny after the pandemic. I mean, our organization also owns health centers, right? Cancer centers, and it's amazing. If you ask a lot of doctors, oh no, you can't do an oncology visit telemedically. I mean, post-pandemic, it's like 50% of all of our follow-ups are telemedicine, and it just reminds me, everybody says it can't be done, but really necessity is the mother of innovation. And it's just these, exogenous events that force us, oh my God, we have to do it this way now, or else we can't do it at all. And it's unfortunate that it takes that kind of stuff to happen, but I'm reminded, what's the next thing that's going to force a bunch of necessary innovations, and then they become adapted as standard of care.
Very true. Our company was started a couple months before COVID. And then, it was great. We saw that people were going to go more decentralized, and that became more popular. But then we also dealt with the headwind of a lot of our funding came from big biopharma, and that's where we thought we were going to start first. And we ended up just picking by all the trials, if you guys don't know, in big pharma. There's a huge backlog of what Hollie spoke about, I believe, earlier. But why is because when COVID happened, they all kind of went home, and there was a pause on everything because they have the capital to do so. But these small med tech companies or these small biotech companies or therapeutic companies, they were in a situation where they had to keep their head above water. And they were either going to go out of business, or they were going to make sure that they finished their trial and that they were able to produce outcomes for their next round of investment. That being said, we completely pivoted, and DCT went to a different arenas that now it's kind of being pigeonholed in, rather than really thinking about opening up. It's not one or it's not the other. Let's just do what is best to move the future of clinical trials forward in terms of, utilizing everyone's expertise.
Gosh, I really like that. I think about, we talked earlier today about oncology, right? So if a patient has to go into a site specifically for, standard of care, radiation, chemotherapy, and then the study drug on top of it, where they have to go in, say, weekly to those visits. How do you see your hybrid approach working with that in that type of situation?
I think it's going to be advantageous for the length of the study in oncology. I think that they're really long and continuous, and I think that it's going to take the burden off the participants.
Right, because it's really hard for those patients to get to the site, to travel to that site if they're that ill, they're that sick, they don't feel well, maybe their disease is progressing, something like that. So for them to have to go into a site, travel to the site on a weekly basis or daily, whatever the case may be, it would be awesome and great for them if they could do it at home.
It also adds diversity to our clinical trials. So a lot of you might not know, but a clinical trial usually is not very diverse. And then we have all of this medication and devices that was tested on just maybe one group of population or one race or one, it's not as secure as we think it should be, because we're taking it and we might be completely different than the population that was in the clinical trial. And that is what I think needs to be addressed as well.
Great. All right, so we've got just a quick time check. So we have about 12 minutes before our panel. So let's, that flew by. I don't know about you guys, but it went by fast for me. Let's take a little bit of a step back, and then we'll open it up for questions to the audience. Hopefully you guys are all engaged and have lots of good questions for us. Neeraj, we had a question on our app. Somebody from the audience, or somebody that had signed up for the session here, had asked, how do you minimize expenditures on clinical trials?
That's something that's on my mind a lot, and I at the fear of being driven out of this room, I think it's by moving a lot of the trials and in a clinical trial work out of the academic setting. And I'm not saying that academic centers play such an important part, but the cost of running an academic trial is orders of magnitude, to a certain extent, higher than in a community-based setting. And 30 years ago, sure, I would say that community-based setting could not compare to UCLA or MD Anderson or Mayo Clinic. But today, technology has changed, democratization of information has changed. That community-based center with the right kind of PIs can be as qualified, if not more qualified, than a lot of these academic centers. And so I think that's a major aspect. I mean, I think there's a lot of, cut and paste questions I can give you, stronger study designs and a lot of these other things. I personally think, breaking down the barriers of the fact that, academic centers kind of have a monopoly on the best high-funded trials in the country or the world, but it's not fair. I think it's, like I said, there's as much innovation happening in Utah. There's as many patients that need access to these trials in places like Utah that, places like Cambridge, Boston, or South San Francisco have. And there are as qualified PIs and physicians in Utah, Nebraska, smaller cities. And it's a revolution that I hope continues to happen.
I can answer that a little bit too. Is this working? Yes. So doing my research recently on AI to prepare for this panel, I read that about 10% of drugs that enter clinical trials actually receive FDA approval. 10%. That's such a small amount, and these trials cost millions and millions of dollars to run. And so that was a little bit shocking to me, and how AI will play into that. And part of the problem is really placing patients in the wrong cohort, retention of patients, and recruitment is a big problem as well. And AI can analyze vast amounts of data to actually match patients, potential patients, to the inclusion-exclusion criteria in a study, which was fascinating to me, and I'm excited for when that actually becomes a common thing. I think it's going to push more drugs through trials to FDA approval and save a lot of financial costs for sponsors, CROs, and sites.
Yeah, on top of saving the money in the trials, I think, has anyone read the book Philadelphia Chromosome in here? Nobody?
No, but now I want to.
Yeah, you have to. The rational drug model, Dr. Dana Farber was told, he went and wanted to cure childhood AML, acute myeloid leukemia, and he was told, oh, it's uncurable, and even if you do it, it's going to take you decades, and even if that happens, it's going to be outrageously cost. And he said that's, and he cured that disease in a matter of like a couple of years. He did it at a cost-effective, because it was a rational drug model they created, saying the payers, so health insurance, payers, and clinics all got together and collaborated, coming all the way back to that 9/11 Commission example. It's when you break down these like walls created by, and I'm just throwing people out there, clinics, everybody's at war with everybody, right? The doctors are at war with insurance companies are at war with industry's at war, so we can't build enough medical schools because then you lose leverage to negotiating payments. So it's, hey, all of a sudden, cooperation leads to value creation. And if anyone gets a chance, that drug was so cost effective, approved in record time, innovated in record time, and it's shocking to me that blueprint has not been followed 1,000 times over, and nobody really still does it that way, and it's sad.
Yeah, because on average, it's 9 to 11 years.
And if you read that book, it's shocking how fast they cured it. And this was an uncurable disease, they said, for children, and now children with this disease are cured.
So we shouldn't be scared of the future. We have to embrace it, and we have to slowly try to, I think, utilize different parts of what we do at work.
I think all of those are great, excellent perspectives. Coming from as a sponsor of drugs, I think you hit on a couple of things too, not only just AI and some of the other, DCTs, but some just getting back to the basics, right, with how the, to reduce costs. I think, Neeraj, you hit on it. You have to have a good protocol, right? And it has to be well vetted, and you have to have the right experts taking a look at it and designing your clinical study. Not only that, but you have to pick the right CRO, right? If you have, a CRO that maybe that's not their expertise in whatever, you're targeting for your drug, you're going to spin your wheels. Sometimes it's a lot more work, so more costs are incurred. Plus also, how many sites you select for your clinical trial. You have to run some metrics to determine, this is the number of patients that I want to treat, or this is how much I need out of my clinical study for my data. So how many sites do I absolutely need? Because you don't want too many sites. You probably want more than, one or two, because the longer your clinical study takes to gather that data and to treat patients, also those costs incur with your CRO.
Yeah. An experienced CRO, it will pay for itself 10 times over. I mean, shameless self-plug. I mean, I have friends that are in the sponsors and pharma companies, and when they come and say, oh, I'm going to run this, and I say, well, why don't you have our group give a look at it, just as a friendly, and they're shocked that, oh my God, I didn't know. And it's because, our group, and I'm sure everyone's group, and, we do the best to say, okay, we need to maximize the efficiency to the sites, and we need to be prudent fiduciaries to the sponsor, right? And that means reducing costs on back office stuff, bureaucracies, et cetera, while not sacrificing quality. And I think we've done a great job. I've seen to do that. So
I also think that there's this weird concept of companies that are started and they have to get funding. So some are they are DCTs, but then they're also a software company. So if they are both, it was easier for them to get funding. And so usually they will provide all their outcomes and then be able to get different stages of funding. But sometimes they either go into the services or they go into the tech world, right? And so that's an object too to kind of think about and look at. How long have they been around? What were they formed? What's their purpose? I mean, there's just a lot of objectives to think about that I see, just being in the arena.
And thorough feasibility studies on your sites too. You know, are you selecting the right sites for your trial? Can they recruit the patients that you need for your trial? Can they get those numbers in and accurately recruit? You know,
I think a really important part of that too is partnering with your site and the clinicians at the site to actually look at the protocol. Because they're the ones on the ground doing the work. They can see what is going to work and what doesn't. And honestly, I've never read a perfect protocol. All of them need a little work. But there are some very well-written ones, and those are the ones where they have partnership and communicated with the PI and the people at the site to refine that protocol and make sure that it's going to work in that real-world setting.
And they're always being changed.
Or even willing to change your study design. If you know it's not working early on, don't keep going down that path. I mean, make the adjustment, you know.
Like our fibromyalgia study, we came in to kind of rescue it. And in a lot of ways we did, because they were able to produce and show profitable for the trial, but good outcomes.
well, that's awesome. Great discussions. Hey, I want to open it up to questions, give a few minutes for folks to ask questions of our wonderful panel here, obviously very knowledgeable and experts in their areas. Anybody? I know you're all like sitting on the edge of your seat waiting. Yes.
So, I mean, so when you mean real world data, like you're talking like getting data directly from EMRs, or, I mean, or you could just, yeah, you know, it's interesting that that's a big area for us. In our clinics, we just switched EMRs from a very legacy, you know, non-cloud driven EMR that had a lot of, you know, handwritten notes, physician type notes. But now, you know, the new system, particularly in oncology, because we know that best, it's a system called Flatiron, owned by Roche. And Epic, Flatiron, all the major EMRs are good about it. A lot of the stuff is kind of almost pre-populated, right? So you kind of reduce a lot of kind of subjectivity, human error. One of the problems is, you know, reading real world data can still become subjective, and so the EMR's evolutions over time will hopefully change that. Right now, when I watch a physician or an MA or an NPPA or a nurse inputting information in the EMR, typing has become a lot less, right? The same way like Google can kind of like almost predict what you're going to search. You know, the EMR is pre-populating all the kind of conditions, all the kind of diagnosis. And so they're just click, yeah, that they presented this, they did this, the physician did that. And so that creates a lot of like readable knowledge. And the only other problem is that then those EMRs have a monopoly over that information, and that real world data goes from Epic straight to Pfizer, and Pfizer can afford it. But, you know, the innovator companies like, well, how do we get access to real world data, right? Because it's not cheap. I mean, somebody told me that the most expensive thing to pay for when you're hacked is healthcare records. So, you know, it's like that information is expensive. So we know we've had companies come to us for access to our EMR data, our quote unquote real world data, and they've been willing to pay a lot of money for it. And we know we want to protect it. There's HIPAA, there's de-identification processes that have to go through. But real world data is powerful, but it's also, I see, kind of monopolistic too. So, and the patient patient hardly controls their data, right? Like, try getting a hold of your EMR data.
All right, we'll take one more question right here. Carol, I think you had a question. She just wants some mic time for a minute.
It might not be on, so there you go. I mean, I cannot lie, AI is a little bit freaky, like we talk about where we go in the future, it's inevitable, but it freaks you out a little bit. So I will say that from a protocol writing standpoint, it's good because trials fail a lot due to protocol design. But when you talk about the workforce and you talk about people out there that are doing these jobs that AI will, it's done, right? What's your thought on that? Have you, obviously I think that's any industry, it's not just the industry we're in, but it's just a thought as we talk about
Is AI
this.
going to replace us? Is that the angle you're going with?
Well, it's not a replacement. It's just, you have, when you see AI at work, it's like, my goodness.
Well, it's doing a bad job of it, if that's what it's doing. I personally don't think that AI will replace our jobs at all. It's just going to reposition things.
I think that one of the challenges in implementing AI technology into clinical research is that change management. Because people, especially people who have been in the clinical research field for years, are used to doing things a certain way. And we are moldable, we are getting into electronic documents, and so we're doing well with that. But AI is a whole nother arena to get used to. I think that it will be more cost-effective in the way of recruitment. You won't have recruiters spending hours and hours data mining when AI can do it in seconds. But I still think that you have to have that human factor. So I don't think that it's going to replace exactly, or ensuring that those algorithms are working.
Maybe as
in
a
the machine
tool
learning.
that we could use.
I know just enough to be dangerous about AI, and I think the scary part for me is I don't know the answer to that question, and I hope that it's somewhat like it's not going to replace us, but it really depends on what side of the bed I woke up on that morning. Like, oh my God, like we're 5 years away or 10 years away from massive displacement across all industries. Or then I'm like, oh no, it's just a hype cycle. It's like crypto 2.0. Or so, and I just, the uncertainty of that, it's worrisome to me because it will displace a lot of stuff, but I just don't know if we really know what the end equation is. And I think we know, like, hey, we know the integers, we know it's addition, but we don't know what that's going to be. Is it going to be? We don't know if it's addition or subtraction in terms of what it means for the value of a human in industry, whatever industry that is.
It just goes back to the fact of the future's scary for a lot of us. If we look at calculating it right now, how is it affecting us? Is it taking away our jobs? No. Is it changing our jobs? Yes. And so I think that we have to lean a little bit on that and not be so hesitant to accept it and to utilize it first and foremost.
I think there will always be a human factor. I mean, an example of this is, part of what they're looking at AI in clinical research is to follow those algorithms to recognize when a patient might drop out of your study. And so they're alerting the clinicians, but AI isn't going to reach out. They're not going to, conduct that outreach to the patient to make them feel more comfortable and try to retain them. That has to be a human. So it's really just assisting us. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys for your time and your preparation. It was fun.
It was fun.
Everybody enjoyed it.
Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you so much.